Welcome to Voices from the Valley, a podcast of the Community Foundation for the Fox Valley region. I'm Amy Spreeman.
And I'm Carolyn Desrosiers. Today, we're talking about trails. The Fox Valley region is full of walking and biking trails that connect our communities. But who uses them, and are they accessible to all? And what should we be thinking about when it comes to making improvements so that more people can enjoy all that our communities have to offer?
You know, there are so many facets to this topic, Carolyn, and we want to start with a few programs in our area that are making a difference for people who might not otherwise have the ability to access these trails. We start with an initiative called Make the Ride Happen, a program of Lutheran Social Services. Its Cycling Without Age has introduced a unique ride on board something called a trishaw. Picture it as a rickshaw on wheels, if you will. We caught up with Cheryl Zadrazil, who explains more.
I think that it brings the community to them. And Make the Ride Happen Cycling Without Age is developing pretty dramatically here in the area. And what they're able to do is provide rides for people in nursing homes, so they can call us and we'll show up and take their residents out for rides. We can also go to events. A lot of the park and recs we've worked with. The most recent one was at the Nelson Family Crossing, where we were able to provide rides for people who've never would have had that opportunity to really travel that trail, or Loop the Little Lakes is another option, which is what we're doing here today.
I'm 82 years old and enjoying life yet.
Eileen Rutten is taking a ride in the open air, something many seniors don't always get to do.
That's nice when you don't have to do the pedaling, because otherwise you get sore legs, right?
We caught up with Eileen as she and her friend Colleen were arriving back to the Menasha Senior Center. They'd spent a drizzly morning last week taking in the fall colors from their two-seater trishaw piloted by Michelle Bachaus.
My name is Michelle Bachaus. I work for the Wisconsin Bike Fed here out of the Fox Valley. Last week, we had some fall color rides in Menasha at the Senior Center. And it's just beautiful colors. We were down by Loop the Lake and took passengers across the trestles. The leaves were changing and the air was crisp, and people just really enjoyed being out there and being part of the community.
Oh, I'd love to do this again. This is fun.
A trishaw for the Cycling Without Age program is a three-wheeled pedal bicycle, or a tricycle. So between those two wheels in the front is a bench seat, kind of like a couch. And then the pilot sits up higher and behind them on the back. It really helps well-being by getting people out who normally just spend their day in their room. It reduces isolation and improves connectivity to the community. Cycling Without Age makes the trails in the Fox Cities so inclusive. It's really been a blessing and a fantastic part of the program to see people who used to play in these fields or used to play along the edge of the water, and they can't access it anymore because of mobility issues. Now they can. An important part of what we're doing is to help those who are underrepresented really feel like they're part of the community. You can't find a better way to feel like you're part of something than if you're out there just immersing yourself in it. And that's really what the trishaws do. Just about anybody can ride on a trishaw. In the Fox Valley, we serve people who are aging, who can no longer pedal their own bikes, but miss the feeling of wind in their hair and sun on their faces. We also provide trishaw rides to people with differing abilities who aren't able to pedal their own bikes. And family members go right along, either in the trishaw with their loved one or riding their bikes alongside of us. All of our pilots are volunteers. Most facilities who have trishaws have 25 to 100 volunteer pilots that kind of rotate through based on their availability. A lot of communities have trailside hubs where they'll start at the assisted living facility and just go down the trail and back. Others go to destinations. They're community-based programs, so they can use these trishaws to take people to the park, to visit a friend, to the pharmacy or grocery store. And then they're just using public roadways. It's typically not me talking and telling stories, but it's typically the passengers talking and telling stories. People don't have opportunity to leave their rooms unless somebody takes them. So I had one person who was a military veteran from Pearl Harbor. And he just shared his stories and he'd smile and he was so proud. And we looped back around and he knew it was time to be dropped off. And he looked at me and he told me in his military voice, he's like, Michelle, you keep going. We're not stopping. So I made another loop.
One thing that's been on the wish list, more accessibility to trails in the wintertime.
Sometimes the assisted living facilities who own their own trishaws, they will pedal the trishaws in the winter inside. So they'll go down one hall and make a loop. And then they'll go down another hall in the adjacent building and make a loop and just keep pedaling people around because they see such a positive impact. One of the things that I'd really like to see us do more of in the Fox Valley is have our trails plowed, because this program doesn't have to end. Those beautiful winter days when the sun is shining, we've got a blanket on the trishaw, and it really helps. It really makes people happy, I guess. It improves their spirit. I mean, it just wakens their spirit up, and they just absolutely love it.
Colleen Walsh of Menasha would have to agree.
Eileen, sitting next to me, told me about it, and it sounded like a fun thing to do. We're friends. We met here at the senior center, so we have a good time together. When can we do it again?
Next, we take you up the road to Heckrodt Wetland Reserve, where recent construction projects are opening up new possibilities for people with challenges of any kind, from financial to physical. It's a learning opportunity in the trees.
Yes, because as Heckrodt's Chris Langenfeld and SOAR Fox Valley's Erin Schultz explain, environmental literacy should be available to everyone.
We're striving to be inclusive simply because it makes sense.
What Heckrodt's done for SOAR participants is created that opportunity. I mean, we have taken youth out, we've taken adults out.
We're always looking for the populations that maybe people aren't thinking about, that aren't included simply because they're not thought of. So once we start thinking of them and think about Heckrodt and what we have the ability to do and accomplish here at our facility, and purposely expand that like we did reaching out to SOAR, that's when it gets really exciting. That's when the dreams start happening, because you're just asking people, what would you like to do? And let them fill in the blank, and then we service their needs. It's incredible.
People living with a disability don't always have the same access that other individuals do and other people do. Like, this partnership with Heckrodt is amazing because Heckrodt is fully accessible. So our participants, youth and adults, are able to get out, get into nature, and reap the same benefits that we all do.
So we are going to become experts on the critters that live beneath our feet.
I'm Janelle Jung. I'm around 23 years old, and I love Heckrodt because I get to see how many different animals there are.
Here you go, Janelle. So this looks like a worm, but with many, 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 many legs.
Can I see?
Yeah,
That's a millipede.
It is exactly right. It is a millipede.
Nice job.
Nice. My parents first got me in Green Bay, but before they could take me home, I had to go to the hospital because I had some sort of a seizure, but after a while they were able to bring me home.
My name is John Jung. I'm a father to Janelle Jung. I think it helps her a lot, just getting outside and enjoying nature.
So we are going to go on a critter scavenger hunt.
It looks like it has legs.
Mm-hmm.
So, yep.
I think you're right.
Nice.
Awesome find.
I'm really good with animals. I just have this magic touch that makes them feel calm. And I know that's not like in any other disabilities, but like if it's a snake or a a bug or another dog, I'm still able to calm them down quite easily.
That's a really good gift to have. A lot of people don't have that.
Yeah.
And what is it about going out on the trails? What do you like to see when you're out here?
All the different colored leaves, deer, and maybe a few turtles or frogs.
Diversity is also ability. And for individuals living with a disability, having access to nature is beyond important.
The Community Foundation for the Fox Valley region is a great resource for making a local impact while simplifying your charitable giving through a tax-deductible charitable fund. Perhaps you're passionate about certain organizations or want to support causes such as education or pets at the animal shelter, or you're interested in addressing the greatest needs of the community. When you partner with us, we'll share our local knowledge so that you can make a difference today and always. Learn more at cffoxvalley.org.
There are so many ways people are getting involved in these projects, Carolyn, from generous donors who are supporting these projects financially to local leaders and environmental specialists who are rolling up their sleeves to talk about the best way to improve trails in the Fox Valley. $19 million in trail construction is planned in the Fox Cities over the next 3 years.
That's right, Amy. And one way our listeners can engage in this topic right now is actually by taking part in a survey that the East Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission is doing for a new pedestrian and bicycle route along the northern edge of Lake Winnebago, linking communities to High Cliff State Park. It's very exciting.
Yes, this survey is intended to help us understand how you intend to use the new route and what would make this project a success. So we're going to put a link in our show notes so that you can take the survey. Now, last year, a Fox Cities Trail Summit organized by the nonprofit Fox Cities Greenways and the East Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission was funded by a grant from the Bright Idea Fund within the Community Foundation.
That's right, Amy. And I recently sat down with someone who spoke at that trail summit, Jason Brozek, the Stephen Edward Scarf Professor of International Affairs and Associate Professor of Government at Lawrence University. And we talked about environmental justice and transportation equity. Here's what he had to say. Welcome, Jason. Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to talk with you. We'd love to just start with having you introduce yourself, your role at Lawrence University, and just tell us a little bit more about how you're involved in cycling and trails in the Fox Cities.
Sure, thanks. So I'm Jason Brozek, and I've been teaching at Lawrence since 2008, and really cycling for a lot longer than that, and involved in cycling as a rider, as a commuter, as a parent, as an advocate. I've gotten more involved in that advocacy role over the last few years. I've joined the Outagamie County Greenway Implementation Committee, which advises on connections between communities at a county level and tries to coordinate some of that work so that there's not standalone pieces of the Fox Valley. And I've also joined the City of Appleton's Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, working with both the Transportation Director and the Parks and Recreation Director, just as a citizen advocate and a voice for bike and pedestrian projects and safety and infrastructure in the Fox Valley.
Well, I want to ask you about something the Community Foundation supported that happened a while ago, but important topics to touch on. So in early 2020, the Community Foundation's Bright Idea Fund supported a Fox Cities Trail Summit. It was a one-day event that brought together leaders from municipalities, environmental organizations, and just advocates with a goal of improving the trail system. And I had the opportunity to be there that day and to hear you speak at the summit, Jason, and you talked about transportation equity and environmental justice. What are these concepts and why should we be thinking about them when we're thinking about trails?
So environmental justice and transportation equity, these are really, they're longstanding interests of mine. In the short version is that when we think about environmental issues or transportation issues, they're not just about the environment and they're not just about moving from place to place. They're connected to equity, they're connected to race, to civil rights in ways that we can't and shouldn't even want to try disentangling. The basic idea of environmental justice is that justice is a redress for injustice. There are some groups that are systematically excluded from power and excluded from decision making, excluded because of race, because of gender, because of class, LGBTQ status, and more. But there are choices that are being made about environmental resources, about where to provide environmental resources like parks and bike paths and bike lanes, about where to locate things like garbage dumps and incinerators, right? But when those decisions are made, the people who are systematically excluded from the levers of power are not consulted. They don't have a voice in the process. And so what it leads to is that environmental injustice or environmental racism is this idea that the greatest harm and the fewest benefits systematically goes to those who are already vulnerable and already marginalized. We have a better and richer understanding of environmental issues and transportation issues when we understand how deeply connected they are to issues of race and marginalization and systemic exclusion and oppression.
Mm-hmm. I like that way of thinking about it. These things are connected and we shouldn't try to disconnect them. So many people in the Fox Cities, when we think of trails, we think of them as recreation. We might make a plan to meet up with friends on a weekend and do the Loop the Lake Trail in Neenah. And we have so many great assets in this community, opportunities. But you talk about trails as part of our transportation system and that they're not just for recreation. Why?
For me, this is a question of who do we have in mind when we imagine a bike rider? Recreational families, folks riding for fitness, bikes as sort of a luxury amenity to entice millennials or home buyers into a community to raise our ranking and livability indexes. Cool. Like, I'm in favor of all of that. But also, like, where is the part of that conversation where we invest in those same families buying cargo bikes to get their kids to school and making sure that they have safe routes? Where in our imagination are folks who are going grocery shopping by bike, or just getting to work and back, or running errands? Are we treating those transportation issues as important areas to invest in? It may not be the same populations of folks that are commuting by bike or grocery shopping by bike as are taking family bike rides along the river. There may be some overlap, but there are probably different populations. Maybe they're different by gender, maybe they're different by race, maybe they're different by class, but we ought to be thinking about those things. And we ought to be thinking about the different experiences that people have in different places. You mentioned People for Bikes survey when we were chatting earlier. And they sent a survey just a couple of days ago where they asked some questions about experiences with bike commuting. And one of the questions was, sort of, on a scale of 1 to 5, how fearful are you of getting hit by a car? Really typical question, common concern for a lot of cyclists. But they also asked a question. They said, on a scale of 1 to 5, how fearful are you? How concerned are you with getting harassed by police when you're riding your bike? And I love that question, because that, for me, says that this is an organization that's really thought about transportation equity and the experiences that marginalized communities might have on their bikes and when they're riding. There's an author whose work I really appreciate, named Melody Hoffman. And she does work in the Twin Cities and in Milwaukee. And she's talking to communities of color, Black and brown communities. And the response she gets from riders is, look, I don't need a helmet. I don't need like a free light from some organization. What I need is for the police to stop hassling me when I'm just trying to ride to work. And that is not an experience that a lot of white middle-class cyclists have. But if we don't understand that experience, then we're missing this whole piece of encouraging more people to ride.
So Jason, the city of Appleton did a trail master plan in 2017, and part of that was an equity analysis. And one of the things they found in that analysis was that there was some disparity in who has access to trails in our community. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was my read of the report and the plan as well. That if you think about a heat map of household income in the city and a heat map of where the investments are in things like bike paths, those heat maps may not align. very well, that those areas of the city with the most resources, the most financial resources, often get the most and the best bike and pedestrian resources. Now, part of that is who has influence over city decision makers, right? Who has the time? Who has the English language proficiency to come to city meetings, to write letters, to advocate for bike lanes? And so for me, it comes down to what do we do about this? And this is where I really do appreciate that the city's equity analysis and the Trail Master Plan does specifically call out those with limited English language proficiency as an underserved community because of this input issue. And what it asks the city to do is reach out and actively engage those communities rather than simply offer opportunities and hope the right people show up.
Yeah, we have to change our way of thinking and our actions around some of these issues.
Right.
So along those lines, what are some of the ways trails could be more accessible to all people in the Fox Valley region?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And this is really the heart of it, right? It's about who feels like they belong on bikes, who feels safe on bikes. There's sort of this spectrum of folks who ride, from fearless and confident riders over here that really don't need any bike infrastructure at all. They're happy to ride on the streets. They'll point out that bikes are vehicles in Wisconsin state law, the same way a semi-truck is a vehicle in Wisconsin state law. And so, right, I'm going to ride on the street as I am legally entitled to do. All the way over to the other end of the spectrum, where there are folks who are interested in cycling more, but really concerned about their safety, concerned about how they'll be treated by other road users. And those are folks who would really benefit from protected and separated bike lanes. I think a lot of the work in the Fox Cities is moving the scale of who is comfortable riding on the streets. And I want to keep pushing that, right? I would love to see more efforts to reach those folks who are interested but concerned and convince them that it's safe and comfortable and family friendly to ride on the streets. So that's part of the answer to making cycling more accessible, is having better infrastructure. If you make cycling easy, if you make cycling safe, then more people will do it. It's if you build it, they will come. And there's this line I love. It's sort of dumb, but I'm going to lay it on you anyway. That you can't make a plan for a bridge. You can't gauge the interest in a bridge by how many people swim across a river. You can't gauge how many people will ride based on how many people are willing to pedal down Wisconsin Avenue. You build the infrastructure. You do it because it's the right thing to do, and then people will start doing it. You don't wait for people to start doing it and then decide 5 or 10 years from now that you'll build it. You make these infrastructure investments because it's the right thing to do. There's this concept of 8 to 80 cities. It's referring to an age range that people should be able to ride around a city independently and safely from the time they're about 8 to the time they're about 80. If you can design a city where 8-year-olds and 80-year-olds both feel comfortable walking and cycling on the streets, you've designed a sort of an accessible, livable city. There's also this work that city planners and city officials need to do. One of them is really thinking about accessibility of meetings and outreach and whose voices are missing. That when you host public input sessions at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, who doesn't have access to that? Who doesn't feel like their voices are welcome in a situation like that? But it's also about the diversity of organizations, right? Who, if there's a Hmong speaker who has some thoughts on trails and access, right? Is there someone in the office who can speak to that person in their own language? So it's about the diversity of organizations. It's about the accessibility and the active pursuit of missing voices in the decision-making process. And for me, it's really about building this infrastructure because it's the right thing to do, and not as a response to demand.
Thank you so much, Jason, for taking the time out to speak with us. I can feel your passion for these issues and just really appreciate all the leadership that you provide to the community so that we can have an accessible community for everyone. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for having me and for hosting this conversation and the other folks you've talked to. I'm really excited to listen to those conversations as well. Thanks so much.
That's going to wrap up today's episode of Voices from the Valley, a podcast of the Community Foundation for the Fox Valley region.
We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we encourage you to subscribe to this podcast and get all of our episodes delivered to you on demand. Just go to our website, cffoxvalley.org. Look for the podcast link on our homepage, click on Podcasts, and get Voices from the Valley delivered to your computer or smart device.
And while you're on our website, we want to hear your voice. Leave us a comment and let us know if there are topics you'd like to hear in future episodes. Thank you for tuning in as we wrap up this episode. We'll see you next time on Voices from the Valley, a podcast of the Community Foundation for the Fox Valley region.